follows. Probably about 45 minutes to an hour of this presentation. And then what we'll do is we'll pause for those who would like to attend the 10:30 service. I attended the early service, so I'm going to remain in this room for discussion, questions, interesting conversations with any of you who have gone to the early service. And then what we'll do is let everybody exit from that service, and then if there's any remaining points, I'm going to linger on after 12 o'clock or after 11:30 when they let out, and we can engage in whatever conversation we want to about the 59 charter members of St. Paul's Lutheran Church. Go ahead, Tom. First of all, we welcome you. My name is Freddie Krieger. I grew up at St. Paul's Lutheran Church. As I'll mention in just a little bit, I, however, am grafted in. I have no direct connection with the charter members, but it's been my privilege in retirement to have the opportunity and now the time to study local family history, local Benton Harbor area Lutheran history stretching out into Bainbridge Township, in fact, and to study and dedicate a good portion of time to the 1899 charter members of Stevensville. If you look on your tables, and not everybody needs one, but there are handouts of what you will see on the display on the screen. So those of you in back, if you don't have a handout, you won't miss anything. It's on the screen, and then they'll be available for you online later on. I might ask Hans if you could take the ones that aren't being used and see if people back there want them. Tables in the front, take the ones not being used, take them to the back in case people in back want them. Also is included a detail of all the 59 charter members, front and back, with various data on them. We'll talk about how that'll be used a little bit later in our presentation. The significance of this opportunity is deep. The significance of an awareness of the founding of this church and the founding members and families of St. Paul's Stevensville is enriching. I like to think that it cements a congregational identity and gives its members a heightened sense of unity that's over and above the unity of fellowship we have through the Word of God and our declared confession of fellowship. It gives value to where we came from and how we got here today. And all of us came from different backgrounds, but we're all in the same place. It reveres not only the founders collectively and individually, but it reveals the circumstances of the founding of which they all took part. And that'll be the essence of our presentation today. The circumstances, background, and experience of the founding members in 1899 and prior. This occasion will also uncover and confirm our connections today with the founders back then, and it provides importance and relevance to the thanks that we give to God on this 125th anniversary. I might pause to ask, what do you know about the founding members of the 1899 Stevensville congregation? Perhaps it could be pictured in this picture right here, a blank slate. You know absolutely nothing. That's okay. I'm glad you're here. This presentation is for you. But perhaps you've got a partial picture. You've been working on it in your mind as you've studied family history, local history, Stevensville history. You know a little bit about the founding of St. Paul's congregation and its charter members. That's good. What I hope to do is add to your palette and complete the picture. Now maybe you have in your minds a complete picture and you know all about everything I'm about to present to you. That's good too. Please share that knowledge with me. However, I found that there are some historical inaccuracies that are embraced to this day. And I want to help clarify some things that perhaps aren't quite correct that people have expressed to me about the history of this congregation and the founding members. And I'm going to dispel some rumors, dispel some inaccuracies today, based on history, of course. The scope of this study is quite narrow. Today we're here not so much to study the individual charter members. We will be doing that at a future time. We're here to study the previous history and experience which led the founding members to establish this congregation. Outside the scope of this study, and other people on our anniversary committee are handling these kinds of things. Many pictures of how it was back then. Other people are handling that portion of the celebration. I'm not going to really study or explain anything about early church history, though it is very intriguing. It is very, it's exciting, really. I'm not going to cover the early pastors, though the first 4 pastors are found in a picture over there on the table. You could look at those later. And I'm not going to delve into all the subsequent early members and their families. You may have a name that goes way, way, way back at St. Paul's, Stevensville, but you may not be linked to a specific charter member, not one of the 59, but you're one of the subsequent member families. I just don't have time to delve into all of those, though I will mention some of them in just a moment. My aims are to inform you, to expand your knowledge and awareness, and to correct some inaccurate notions perhaps, and to inspire further study on your part. Now, based on our presentation today, you may be inspired to further study about our congregation. That's good. You may be inspired to study the history of St. Matthew's congregation in Benton Harbor. You may be inspired to study the history of Trinity St. Joe congregation, 1860 and then 1867. You may be inspired to family history study. I think that's just great. I hope that this course today, brief as it is, helps you in your excitement and pursuit of that. But the main thing, one of the main things I want to do by our study today and the 2 subsequent studies we have in April and June is to acknowledge the descendants of those 59 charter members. That is, everybody in this room and in our congregation and from the area community. And we have people here from Bainbridge Township who have come here to celebrate and learn from us today. We have people from Benton Harbor, St. Joseph here today. We'll have online people from Ottawa, Canada, Saskatchewan, Alberta, some people in other parts of the nation tuning in as this presentation is put online to them. I want to link up the present people like you with the founding members of 1899. For instance, here, from study, I found that Jim Mischke, is Jim here in the room? He'll be here later, I'm sure. Jim Mischke, and many of us know him. Jim is the grandson of founding member Elder Henry Mischke. And everybody who is able to let me know that they're related or they think they're related to a charter member, I want to acknowledge that descendancy and offer you a certificate of recognition. If you turn to the next page, page 9, you'll see, I'm sorry, let me go back. After that, page 6, I do have to admit also, like an apple tree, and you don't have the different colored apples on your pictures on page 6, but you see the different colored apples on this apple tree. We have an apple tree in our backyard that has different colored apples. Why? Because somebody grafted in different kinds of apples into that one trunk. I, Freddie Krieger, am grafted in to this congregation. I can't trace my descendancy directly to a charter member. My descendancy comes, for instance, from Trinity Sawyer, Trinity Bridgman and Trinity Sawyer. But how about you? you may be a direct descendant of one of the charter members. If so, I'd like you to turn to this page in your handout, page 9. What you want to do is rip this out in your folder, and find a folder. If you don't have a folder with you, find one later. And please fill this out and get it to me how you think you are, or how you know you are related to one of the 59 charter members. What I would like to do then is honor you with a certificate of recognition for that relationship, and then I'm going to post those certificates of recognition next to the family member that you are directly or by marriage descended from. In that way, I hope to unite the present with the past. The historical background of St. Paul's charter members, 1899. If you have any further questions, or if you've got something you want me to note in upcoming presentations, or if you would like a copy of something you see on the screen, I want you to sticky note me. I'm making up a new verb. I want you to sticky note me. I want you to sticky note me. Every table has a sticky note. Just register your question, anything that you might have for me on a sticky note, leave it on the table, and I'll try to respond to your request or your area of interest that you'd like to know more about, if you just sticky note me. On page 12, you see an outline that I'm going to endeavor to follow. In one order or the other, we will try to cover those 13, 14 topics. Notice at the bottom of this, this points forward to our April 7th and June 2nd segments, which will go into detail on the family of Albert Paulus, the family of Carl Haase, the family of William Hebner. Some people have asked me, oh, when are you going to study my Seward family? Well, I can't tell you, because then you only come to one. The other value of coming to both is that these families are so interconnected by marriage and by familial relationships that you won't want to just come to one. You want to see how they're tied into other families who will be detailed in a different one of these two presentations. So you can look forward to the detail on these families on those two upcoming dates. The first steps to a church. I told you I'm not going to say anything much about the history of the church, but I do want to give you a little historical background of what these 59 charter members and their families did. If you take a look at this account from the Stephenville and area 1984 Centennial book, you'll notice a couple of things. The first service was held on March 5th, 1889. The church was founded as such in February, just earlier, a month earlier than that. The first worship service took place in a place at the time known as Schneck's Hall. It then later outgrew that, and it rented the Methodist church building up on the south side of town, west side of the road. Many of you know where that building is, and it still stands. And then they decided, we're going to build a church. They engaged the services of a Benton Harbor architect to design a church, which ultimately cost them $1,700. By this total, it gives us a little bit of a historical background of what the experience of our original charter members were. If you do the math, $1,700 back then is the equivalent to $63,000 today in 2024 dollars. And you're saying $63,000, that's nothing. If our church today decided to do something for $60,000, that's really no big deal. But see, it's different. You and me have what we would call ready, regular income, whether it would be by our employment, from which we get a salary or hourly pay, or we receive a benefit from our investments, our Social Security. We receive regular income. Think of what it was for them back then. These 59 charter members who expended a commitment for $1,700 survived on the bare subsistence of a family farm, all but about 4 of them. They didn't have what you and I would call a regular income. That gives us a little bit of a historical sketch for how this figure that doesn't seem much to us today was really quite a hefty commitment. If anybody wants to see it, it doesn't exist now. This is what was known as Schneck's Hall. If you would look this way from the old grocery store, now Goodwill, look this way at the bank. You're looking at the front of that building right there. The Schneck family was a grocery family, originally a bakery family. Ernest and Frederick Schneck owned across the street, but they also owned where the bank was, and they owned this segment of property, and this is what they rented out to the Lutheran congregation that needed a place to worship. Next page shows just a little glimpse at what it would have looked like. Though we're not studying it in detail, this helps to give us a little historical sketch and a background to what our 59 charter members and their families finally achieved. You notice in this picture, a fuzzy service station would be right here. Everybody go down. Yeah. When I grew up, this was the old caseworm house next to the railroad tracks. Some people call that the Milky House. The Milky family once lived there. This building here, the American Hotel, is now up on Red Arrow Highway. John Beers, the American Hotel. This used to be the main highway from Chicago to Benton Harbor and points northward. We now call it St. Joe Avenue. That was old M11. On this location here, here's Schneck's Hall. This is the church. This is about 1906 or 08 or something. The church, the parsonage, and the school there. So that gives you an idea of a historical sketch of what ultimately that $1,700 of an investment and a commitment, what that led to. Now, who were those that did that back in 1899? I like to draw a parallel between the founders of our United States of America and the commitment and dedication that they had. I like to draw a parallel between them and the commitment and dedication that the original 59 charter members and their families undertook. Historically, in our founding American documents, there is a place where it says, "For the support of this declaration," the Declaration of Independence, "with firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, God, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." To an extent, the 59 charter members of St. Paul's made the same sort of commitment here in Stevensville, Michigan in February of 1899. And as we go on, we will see what a commitment that really was to each other and to the glory of God. It was not for their sacred honor, it was for the sacred honor of the Lord, for the word and sacrament that would be distributed through the congregation. The first congregational meeting minutes entry reveals something quite important. And now Ernie Oki and Reverend Schreier will probably forgive my mispronunciation of my German. The first sentence reads something like this, and many of you at that table, by the way. Über Gründung und Ursprung der Gemeinde. Concerning the founding and establishment, the institution of the congregation. And the German script proceeds from there to say this. St. Paul's congregation was founded on February 24th, 1899 by a number of members who belong to Trinity Evangelical Lutheran Congregation and others. And for the reason, this is important, for the reason that they wanted to have a church and school nearer by, for the reason that they wanted to have a church and school nearer by, they established St. Paul's congregation in Stevensville, Michigan. If anybody would like to see that document in the original, I'll point with the red pointy thingy. Back on that table back there, the original minutes written by William Hebner, secretary at that time, are on the book on the table. Be very careful if you page through it. It's an original document. Don't lick your fingers and turn the pages. But you notice the reason. We're going to get into an explanation of that reason and an expounding of it a little bit more in just a moment. Who were the charter members? And I'm talking here about the signatories to the Constitution of the original St. Paul 1899 congregation. Fortunately, William Hebner was selected, I believe, as secretary because he had good handwriting. There's nothing worse than studying German Lutheran history with a scribe or a pastor or a secretary who has bad handwriting. But he had very good handwriting, and on the page of that document back there, he details very clearly who the original charter members are. In it, we're fortunate we have a definitive list, 59. They're on the list. Others may have joined the month thereafter, the following spring, but we have a definitive list which could limit the study a little more closely. With St. Matthew's congregation, by the way, and a presentation on the history of St. Matthew's congregation, much like this, will take place at Beautiful Savior Lutheran Church in June of this early summer. St. Matthew's congregation, it's impossible to identify exactly who the founders were. So I just did the first 59. These are the first 59 charter signatories to our Lutheran Church.
Real quick question on the 59. How come Schneck isn't on there since he is the one that donated the whole land thing?
Exactly. Could you turn the... let me get to that. If I don't answer it, I'm going to ask you to speak up again. Next page. The term charter member, we must expand that a little bit, because charter member can be understood as the leaders of the household who were signatories who committed their household fund, resources, and activity to the church. That's the 59 charter signatories. However, charter members also includes the spouses of the charter members and all of their children, in fact. So when we speak about charter members in the narrow sense and in the wider sense, I wanted a list on page 20 of the charter member signatories and their spouses and their wives. These are likely their first wives in case they became a widower, but this would have been their first wife, I believe, on that list. Only one of our charter members was a bachelor, William Kaufman. Only one was a bachelor. The rest were all married. Now I get to what I call, in answer to Mr. Trellenberg's question, I call them honorary charter members or subsequent near charter members. In the obituaries of the people that you see listed on this page, in their obituaries, even though they were spouses of an actual charter member, or even though they were children of an actual 59 of the 1899 59 signatories, they considered themselves charter members of the church by virtue of them being in the family of that signator. Notice down here I get to the Kubal family, very prominent family in the past in the Stevensville area. Augusta Kubal's obituary mentioned her as a charter member, even though he didn't join. Carl Kubal didn't join until November later that year. But somehow they considered themselves close enough to the 59, time-wise, that the family considered themselves charter members. The Schneck family, down here, Ernest Schneck, what about her? Well, his wife Laura Schneck mentioned her in her obituary. It was mentioned that she was an original charter member of the church through, perhaps we don't have his signature as one of the 59, but perhaps maybe he wasn't able to come to the meeting. Maybe he was busy. Maybe he signed on to the Constitution later on. I don't know. I can't find any record of Ernest or Frederick Schneck in our church records, though I do know they were intricately involved in the founding of St. Paul, Stevensville, 1899. Enough to where I'll mention him in just a moment. So I have a list for you on the next page of what I call subsequent charter members of the church. That is, those who in ensuing years, the heads of families who attended a congregational meeting, and the question was asked, have you signed the Constitution yet? Oh no, I wasn't there when they first signed it on February 24th, 1899, but it's November, let me sign the Constitution. By signing the Constitution, that leader of that family was making a confessional declaration of fellowship. They were saying what this church believes in, as stated by the Constitution, what this church believes in, my family believes in too. And when they made that public expression, then they became charter members of the church. Here's subsequent members of the founding. Very difficult to read because many times these are their own signatures. Many of these individuals didn't really know how to write. If you would like a translation or a transliteration of the pages that are before you, I'll point you to the back of the room back there. I posted on the wall a display called Subsequent Members of the Church. And I've done my best to translate who those signatures belong to. So, if you're saying to yourself, wait a minute, I know my family was involved in the founding of the church. True, they may not have been there through the head of the household at the February 24th, 1899 founding meeting, but they may have been there at a subsequent meeting, and so they were intricately involved in the beginning of St. Paul's congregation. If you find somebody know somebody in your family that you wonder about, I'll study it. Sticky note me. I'll tell you when they joined the church. And if their names aren't found on that list there, I'll investigate further and I'll get you an answer. If you only sticky note me.
Freddie, the numbers to the left of the signatures, are those the dates they signed, you think, or?
What these are is a later pastor, I believe Pastor Kuski, when he studied the original German documents of the minutes, he put the minutes of the congregational meeting next to this list, and in the minutes it says when that signatory joined the church, at which meeting. The date of the meeting is there. For instance, right here, when Robert Fiedler joined the church, it's in the minutes. And so I believe Pastor Kuski put these notations here when he later on translated the minutes of the church. And by the way, Pastor Kuski's English translation of the original German minutes, the first several years are back on the table there, the English typewritten translation. By the way, many signatures are crossed out. That was the pastor's record of when they died or when they transferred to another congregation, perhaps in Bridgman or back to Benton Harbor. Thank you for your question. On the right, there are dates, and I believe those dates are when they were released or when they passed away. Something a little bit interesting to note historically, by an analysis of the ages of the founding members. Using the census from 1900 as a resource, it's easy to identify how old these individuals, husband, wife, and children were. Just for yourself, kind of, find the four oldest. The four oldest. There's four in their 60s. See who they are? Okay, now find the four youngest. I believe there's 4 in their early or mid-20s. You see who they are? Everybody else is in between. What does that tell us? Well, the 59 charter members of St. Paul's Lutheran Church, they gathered together as a body of believers in a common confession of faith and a commitment to founding a Christian Lutheran congregation, not based on the fact that they were all good friends because they were the same age group. They weren't. They were all over the map in regards to their ages. Some of them were grandfathers. Some of them were only fathers. Some of them maybe hadn't gotten married yet. The average age is 40.5 if you do the math. But it gives us a little historical background that the similarity that these individuals, these families had in common wasn't a cultural, social similarity like they were all the same and joining a societal club. They were gathering, regardless their age, based on a common commitment and a dedication to their Lutheran confession, their declaration of faith. When they immigrated to America, there's really 2 different segments of this. You'll see on the right, try to locate the individuals who have a V next to their name, a V. And then earlier than that, you'll notice people who don't have a V. There were really 2 migrations of German Lutherans to America who moved to Stevensville and were influential in the founding of St. Paul's Lutheran Church. There were the earlier migrations to Stevensville from the 1860s and on from Germany and Prussia. We'll get into that later. These are all German families who came from Germany or Prussia to locate in Stevensville. And then in 1892, something else happens. We see a V. Those are more recent Volhynian German families. Germans from Volhynia, Russia. Take special note of that. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Where did they come from? Where did they come from in Europe? Well, they came from Europe to Stevensville. Unlike many German Lutherans of Dowagiac, Eau Claire, Sodus, they didn't come to Benton Harbor or St. Joe first. These Germans came first, it appears, to Stevensville. But where did they come from? If you take a contemporary map, you could locate in Europe Germany and Poland, and then several of the former Soviet countries in the middle, and then Ukraine down here, and then Russia over here. If you take and cluster into 2 segments the migrations I'm talking about, you'll get Germany and Poland over the years becoming Germany and Prussia. That's where the earlier migrations from Europe came to settle in Stevensville. And then later migrations, modern day Ukraine, we have the Volhynian Germans who were located up in this area of Ukraine, according to a modern day map.
Freddie,
Yeah?
was there conflict in Europe at this time that spurred people from that location to come?
Let me get to the why. That's where I wish I had 3 hours. Here's a picture, and I put this picture up because many of you of a recent German migration background. And I'd like to just say, you on this table here, you are recent German immigrants from Europe. By the way, if you haven't met the people on this table, get to know them. I just want to distinguish between the wider German Empire and then you may say, oh, I know that my ancestors came from Saxony, or I know they came from Brandenburg or Lower Saxony, or they came from Prussia. And many times people who came from Prussia came from anywhere in this area when we're talking about the Prussian kingdom later on. And then, of course, Russia over to the right. I want this map because why didn't the people in Europe, instead of coming to America, why didn't they, for whatever reason, just move back to Germany instead of moving to America. The population density of Europe, and I believe this is probably the late 1800s, the population density in Germany proper became such that to go back and to begin a farm once again was quite impractical. And so America was quite a better option. Here we have modern day Ukraine, up in the corner northwest Ukraine, a place close to my heart because I am one, that's Volhynia. My father was a wanderer and I'm a wanderer too. Everybody, my father, everybody's danced to that, right? I'm of Volhynian German extraction. And so I'll say a little bit more about this in a moment. This area of Volhynia, Ernie Oki, more recently, you came here in the 40s, yes?
Yeah.
Ernie Oki came in the 40s?
How about 50s?
In the 50s. Ernie Oki and his family recently lived up in this area. And I am going to mispronounce the name of the towns, even though you taught me correctly how to pronounce them. But towns like Zhytomyr and Lusk and Roshasha. I'll describe the three areas that most Berrien County Lutherans came from in Volhynia in just a little bit. Here's a map and a location of the many colonies of Germans who lived in Russia at that time. Over 3,000 colonies of Germans who, because of economic and governmental and warfare reasons, they fled Germany to Poland, what we know as Poland, Prussia today. And then it got intolerable for them to live there. They took advantage of the opening by the Tsarina Catherine to come to Volhynia to settle those lands and become farmers and develop those lands in Volhynia. And that resulted in 3,000 colonies of Volhynian Germans. There would be Volhynian Germans, there would be Volga Germans were farther to the east. Volhynian Germans, you would have Baltic Sea Germans, Crimea Germans, Odessa Germans, many different Germans down in what now is the Ukraine. I want to see if I get Claire's question. Excuse me a moment. My voice needs to rest anyway. I don't see it, but I know I have it. Where they lived prior to here. They lived in two main areas, and I've described Germany or Prussia, we could say, or Volhynia, Russia. 83% of our 59 charter member families came directly from Germany or Prussia, we would say, 83%, and 17% came from Volhynia. The Volhynian families I've tracked here, the Baumann, Burkholz, Borkwart, Lars, Liebeck, Lockwitz, Pashkoda, Rocco, Schadler, and even the Albert Mischke family. I know the towns where their children were born in. The identification of where those towns were, I know. Elizabethina was by Roshasha. Solomka, Friedrichsdorf, I say this for you study family history, near Marcellenhof, Mashasha, and the rest of it in northwest Volhynia. I want to make something out of it because as we compare statistically St. Paul's with St. Matthew's, originally called Zion Evangelical Church, you'll have to come to the June presentation to learn why. St. Matthew's, 51% came from Germany or Prussia, 49% came from Volhynia. A much higher concentration of German Lutherans from Volhynia helped to found the St. Matthew's congregation in 1896 and then finally in 1899. So this is where they came from, the charter members of Stevensville St. Paul's. Now here's the question, why did they emigrate? If you have a pencil and you're taking your package home, I want you to circle two things on this slide. This is the worst slide of this entire presentation. This isn't fully developed. I just want you to circle two things. Number one, the impact of the Prussian Union and Russification efforts in Volhynia. The impact of the Prussian Union and upon the church and the Russification efforts in Volhynia. I hereby summarize generally. In Europe, in Prussia, in the Prussian kingdom, the emperor, I believe it was Frederick William III, always wanted to unify his people of his kingdom, the Reformed and the Lutheran. And he said, no more distinctions. We're not going to have any more Reformed, and we're not going to have any more Lutheran. You are going to be one. You are going to be in a union. Regardless what you believe and what your confessional status is, you are going to be one. That is the religious Prussian Union. Now, many Lutherans could not tolerate that because they were forced into, for instance, a liturgy in worship where they could not express their belief in the true body and the blood of the Lord Jesus Christ in the Lord's Supper. They were forbidden legally from using that liturgy. And so they rebelled against this Prussian Union, and it became intolerable for them in the kingdoms in Germany and also up to the northeast in Prussia, and it gave them reason to leave. We cannot practice our faith because of governmental mandates. I wish there was a place we could go in order to practice our biblical Lutheran faith. Guess what? America needed farmers in the Midwest. The state of Michigan, for instance, sent agents over to Germany, to Prussia, to advertise, come, look at the land that's available, look at the freedoms we have. And many people from Germany, what we would say Prussia, appealed to that in the 1860s through the 1890s, and they were happy to come to a place like Stevensville because it was here that they could practice their biblical Lutheran faith without the mandates of the Prussian Union at the time. So that's one reason they came. The other reasons are economic decline in the area as the Russians came in and took over, and the Germans came in and took over, and the Prussians took over, and then the Russians, it was just tumult. It was everyday chaos and governmental tumult. Another good reason to move to America. The other reason was land leases were harder to get because although at first the German Lutherans from Germany were given the land leases that previously were signed on to by the Polish people, the Russian people replaced the Polish people with Lutherans, but then later on it switched the other way. The Polish people gained prominence and pushed the Lutherans out. Where to come? There's land in America, there's land in Berrien County, there's land in Lincoln Township and Lake Township and Royalton Township. The other thing to mention, that by the way explains the founding of the Missouri Synod in 1839. The Missouri Synod was founded by Stephan and many other theologians who were imprisoned back in the 1830s because of their adherence to Lutheran biblical doctrine. They got thrown in jail, those pastors did, and many of their people. So finally they said, we can't stay here and fight anymore. We're leaving and going to America. And they rented 4 ships, one of them didn't make it, with several hundred and more people up the Mississippi River to Perry County, Missouri, and they founded what we know today as the Missouri Synod. They were known as Old Lutherans. The old Lutherans in Europe couldn't stand it anymore, and most of them had to get out. Or many of them went down to Volhynia. The old Lutherans came to America, many of them, and that explains the earlier migration that I pointed to on the previous display. The Russification efforts in Volhynia Officially in 1880, the Russian government handed down a mandate that churches and schools in Volhynia must now teach, not in German, but they must teach in Russian. They must teach in the Russian language. Now, my forefathers in Volhynia saw the writing on the wall. They resisted for a good many, 20, 25 years, but as time went on, the encroachment of that mandate and its influence upon the German Lutherans in Volhynia started to take hold. Some of the 1890 Volhynian German church records are in Russian. And that some of I married into the Shinsky family from Eau Claire. Some of their church records, 1890, from Konyako up by Russia, they're in Russian. That shows the influence of the mandate of Russification. I believe that the Volhynian Russians, Germans, came to America, came to Benton Harbor, came to Stevensville because here was freedom. They could exercise their biblical Lutheran faith in the German language, instruct students in school in their native German language, and so that became another reason why they came to America. By the way, they saw the writing on the wall. What would happen to the Volhynian area, beginning about the year 1914? The Great War. It wasn't called the First World War because there was no other World War before or after it, or before it. So it's called the Great War. I think they saw the writing on the wall, the far distant drumbeats of world unrest in their region. And sadly, Ukraine, that area, has been fought over and has changed hands more than the nation of Israel in 1948. So that's why, thank you for the question, that's why I believe it was so easy for the Eastern European German Lutherans to move to Berrien County, to America, to Berrien County, and certainly to North, South Dakota, to Alberta, Canada, to many other areas of the United States besides Berrien County. Congregational affiliations prior to 1899. I can tell the next question. The next question is, well, they started the church in 1899. These were dedicated German Lutherans. Where did they go to church? Where did they affiliate spiritually for worship, for pastoral service prior to 1899? I have the answer for you. Through a record of analysis of the child baptisms of all of their children, I detected a trend. Most of the 1899 charter member families, before the church was begun, had their children baptized at Trinity Lutheran Church, St. Joseph, Michigan. Interesting history. Did you know Trinity Lutheran was not started in St. Joseph in 1867? It was started in Bainbridge Township in 1860. That's where all the German Lutherans were. And then they realized more German Lutherans were moving into St. Joseph, early mid-1800s. Then they relocated to St. Joseph Avenue, same block on which they're located today. But 32 of our charter member families, 54%, were active. That is, they sought pastoral service for baptisms, for marriages, for funerals, for confirmation instruction in St. Joseph, Michigan, 5 miles north at Trinity Lutheran Church. Interesting, not all charter member families affiliated with Trinity. Remember it said this church was founded by individuals from Trinity Lutheran Church, St. Joseph, and others. What was that? I could only find one other church that some affiliated with. They affiliated with St. Peter's Evangelical Church, which, if you know where Trinity is, it's right across the parking lot from Trinity. That became, 1865, that became an evangelical church, St. Peter's. St. Peter's, why did 10% of the founding members affiliate there, even though they weren't Lutheran? Two reasons. Remember the influence of the Prussian Union back in Europe. They were accustomed to a watered-down version of Lutheranism based on the mandate that there's no distinction between Lutheran and Reformed anymore. That Prussian Union in Europe led to seminaries which pumped out pastors by the hundreds that the Lutherans couldn't keep up with to send to America. And so many pastors came to Michigan. They founded evangelical congregations throughout the state of Michigan, throughout southwestern Michigan. The evangelical church took over many original Lutheran founded congregations who couldn't get a pastor, but they could get an evangelical pastor. But one thing about St. Peter's and the evangelical church at that time, they spoke German, so that was good. I will affiliate there, but they also subscribed to a portion of the Lutheran confessions. The Evangelical Church of the United States subscribed to the small town article, the Formula of Confession, and besides the Heidelberg Catechism, they did confirmation instruction out of Luther's Catechism. So for our 1899 charter members of St. Paul's, some of them to affiliate at St. Peter's, it was not so much different than what they experienced back in Europe, and so they did. By the way, I put at the bottom of this, living in Stevensville in 1898, if you were a German Lutheran, it was different than back in the old country. In the old country, whether it be modern-day Poland, Prussia, Germany, Saxony, Brandenburg, whether it be Volhynia, whether you be a Volgan German out by the river to the east, you just about had a Lutheran church in every colony. If you didn't have a pastor, you had one pastor with 30 churches, and der Lehrer, the teacher, who was theologically trained for catechism instruction to do preaching and baptism. And so, whereas over in Europe, they had a Lutheran church in every colony, pretty well, even though they maybe a good 60%, 70% did. But they're sitting here in Stevensville, Michigan, and where did they have to go for pastoral service? How many miles? Just a comparison with Zion, St. Matthew's. I want to make this point. I won't deal with the statistics. The first Zion German Evangelical Church, 1896, which became St. Matthew's, was not distinctively Lutheran. I'll teach that to the people over there in June. It was an evangelical church. They couldn't get a Lutheran pastor in February of 1896. So the retired pastor from St. Peter's served them, and they joined the American Evangelical Synod. But then along came Reverend Bass from South Haven, who helped them get a Lutheran pastor, Reverend Kronheim. Then they became Zion German Evangelical Lutheran Church, distinctively Lutheran in November of that year. And that led to the distinct old Lutheran brand of Lutheranism of St. Matthew's that we know and love today. So they became distinctively Lutheran as St. Matthew's came out of Zion. But one thing to note, St. Paul's Stevensville was distinctively Lutheran from the start. From the start. A solid foundation on the scriptures, on the Lutheran confessions, and pastors who preached and taught according to them. A historical question, was St. Paul's a daughter congregation of Trinity? Was St. Paul's a daughter congregation of St. Matthew's? My answer, no. And this is something that probably most people don't realize. After the minutes say, after the members of this congregation had turned to the Missouri Synod for service unsuccessfully a number of times, they finally turned to a pastor of the district of the Michigan Synod. We would know that as the Wisconsin Synod today. And Pastor Barrett of Benton Harbor, he declared himself willing to serve temporarily, and the pastor from St. Matthew's conducted the first worship service March 5th, 1899 here. Actually, when we study the early minutes of Trinity congregation, we actually see that the 59 charter members who founded this church, the Trinity congregation kind of considered the St. Paul Stevensville effort a form of ecclesiastical rebellion. They were not for it by any stretch of the imagination. To say that we're a daughter of Trinity would be the farthest from the truth. In fact, they pretty much congregationally resisted the founding of St. Paul Stevensville. And it was a point of contention in the minutes. Note why. If you go through the statistics of the years previous to that, a good eighth to a quarter of the baptisms which took place at Trinity in those years were Stevensville people. If Stevensville congregation got off to a start, a good chunk of the Trinity congregation would be lost to the St. Joseph congregation. That was perhaps it was a threat, I don't know. The other thing was Trinity had a satellite school on the corner of Marquette, around the corner of Glenlord and Cleveland Avenue. 1876, that school was founded, and they realized if St. Paul's was to open a school, it would take away from our students going there, and it did. So no, Trinity was not a Trinity didn't spawn off, or St. Paul's was not a daughter congregation of Trinity by any stretch of the imagination. I want to give benefit of the doubt, by the way, to the pastor, Pastor Zlumke, who the minutes say was asked to serve this upstart Lutheran body. Look at the schedule Pastor Zlumke had. Between the years 1890 and 99, a single pastor in 10 years conducted 728 baptisms, 169 funerals, and did 135 weddings. You talk about a busy pastor in St. Joe? Oh, you want me to help start a church in Stevensville? With the schedule I have, are you nuts? I understand why Pastor Zlumke was not an advocate of the initiation or becoming intricately involved with the founding of St. Paul Stevensville. Did they help acquire a pastor? No. In fact, the original founding members, our minutes say, they appealed to Trinity Lutheran for help in getting a pastor, and Trinity Lutheran said, no, we're not going to help you. Then they went over their heads and went straight to St. Louis, to their seminary, and they asked, can you send us a pastor? And the response was, much like Wisconsin at the time, we just don't have any candidates to send you. Pastor shortage in the late 1890s. And so no help from them. So help acquiring a pastor, Trinity either wasn't able or was unwilling to help out. St. Matthew's, they gave no financial assistance, but their Reverend Baird did consent to conduct worship and serve the members here from February 24th, 1899 until they got their own pastor. So Reverend Baird did assist. Now, was this a daughter congregation of St. Matthew's? If you look at the historical account written by Reverend Hazy, 1848, he would say two things. He would say, is this? I'm mixed up. He would say two things. He would say, thus St. Matthew's assisted in aiding the congregation at St. Paul's in its beginning. Yes, St. Matthew's assisted by virtue of the fact their pastor consented to come serve, much like he did with the Lutherans in Coloma, which ended up being Salem Lutheran Church. But his next sentence is incorrect. He says, this was the first church that was thus launched from St. Matthew's. I'm sorry, I was a member of St. Matthew's in 1959, my first, second Lutheran church in America, but we were not a daughter congregation of St. Matthew's. So what were we here at Stevensville? Historically, this is my words, St. Paul Stevensville was a distinctively Lutheran congregation, originally independently founded by a group of 59 families without the influence or support of a mother church. A truly grassroots effort by the men and women residing in an area inconveniently distant from the nearest Christian congregations that previously served them. As we start to close and segue into our next segment, where did they live? The next man